Hi, I'm Dr. Annadale, and today I want to talk briefly about a blog post by Dr. Miriam Sweeney titled How to Read for Grad School, in which Dr. Sweeney gives 4 pieces of important advice for reading academic texts, and I think they'll be beneficial to my students as well. Her first piece of advice is to read strategically, not linearly. And by this, she means you don't want to read an academic work the way you would read a novel, beginning on the first page, reading through all the way to the last page. This is not the proper way to read academic texts at a high level. The way you want to read an academic text is to begin by reading, I would say, the outside material on the back of the book's cover, on the inside jacket copy, the author's biography, the summary of the work, the table of contents. All of these things will give you an idea before you've read the first word of the text of what kind of project the book is dedicated to, what kind of thing the author takes herself to be doing. You then want to read the introduction to the book and the last chapter. You want to read these carefully with an eye of seeing what's going on in the book and whether it's going to be worth any more of your time. In between the introduction and the conclusion, you want to be fairly selective about what you read. You may read just a single chapter in its entirety. You might read the beginning and end of a chapter. You might focus in on a particular chapter that's especially significant or especially interesting for you. But don't feel that you should be reading any academic book at in a linear fashion once you get to graduate school. For an article that you were reading, you would want to keep in mind first the article title and the journal title in which it appears. These are going to give you an important set of limiting principles for the limits of what the author is doing. You want to read carefully the abstract of any journal article that you pick up. The abstract is carefully crafted by the author to give you a clear idea of what's going on in the paper, its methods, its limits, its engagement and citations. For a journal article, you want to begin by reading the introductory paragraphs with special attention to the framework and citations, which give you a sense of the neighborhood in which the paper will take place, who the author regards as the immediate intellectual neighbors of the thesis, who the author regards as important authorities with whom the author is in dialogue. You'll then want to read the conclusion of the paper. Any conclusion to a journal article should include some kind of answer to the question of why you, the reader, should care about the thesis that's being defended. That should give you a good idea of how much of the rest of the paper to read and what elements of the argument in between the intro and conclusion you should focus on. The second piece of advice Dr. Sweeney gives is to take notes while reading. This is vitally important. You cannot absorb material at a high level from an academic text if you're not taking notes while you are reading. So you should have a note-taking system, either on paper, on sticky notes in the book, or in the margins of the book itself, perhaps with a series of underlining. One important principle that she reminds us of is to remember that future you has no idea what present you is thinking as you read the book. So you're going to have to leave enough notes in the book or in your notes for a future version of you, either 2 months or 2 years from now, to be able to reconstruct the process of thought that you're having. So if a particular passage reminds you of an element in Plato, write the word Plato in the margin, or even a citation to the doctrine of Plato that you are thinking of. Don't just write the letter P, for example. The third piece of advice Dr. Sweeney gives is to be purposeful in your reading for graduate school. And by which I would say, don't read just to have read. Don't read something simply so you can go in class and tell the professor, yes, I read the book, I passed my eyes across all the words, I said most of the words to myself mentally. You want to keep in mind as you read the context of the course, the context of your particular project, perhaps a paper that you're composing, and you want to read in order to get relevant information for your project, for your use. So don't read in a dutiful fashion, read in a purposeful fashion with those goals in mind. And the fourth piece of advice she gives is to take a critical perspective. And this can mean many different things depending on your field. At the very least, I think it would mean asking what kind of values are implicit in this piece of writing, in this piece of research, in this work, and how would the work itself be different if we shifted some of the perspective or the assumptions or the values that underlie it. So those are 4 pieces of advice for how to read in graduate school by Dr. Miriam Sweeney. I recommend you read the entire blog post. I'll put a link in the description to this video. Thanks for watching today. Goodbye.